when you get into your car, shut the door, and turn the key, you probably feel like you're in a private space, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's your own little rolling sanctuary. You can sing at the top of your lungs, or, you can yell about a totally frustrating day at work.
Just enjoy the quiet.
Exactly. You can just sit in total silence and decompress before you go inside your house. And for over a century, the automobile has represented this very specific kind of insulated freedom.
Right. It's a bubble.
It is. It's just you, the steering wheel, and the road.
Mm.
And the glass separates you from the rest of the world. But today, we are tearing down that specific assumption.
You really are.
Because we have a stack of 3 incredible, frankly, eye-opening articles exploring some deep technical blueprints. Specifically, we're looking at new patents and engineering concepts surrounding vehicle biometric surveillance.
Which is a huge shift.
It is. So our mission for this deep dive is to explore how the modern car is fundamentally shifting from a simple mode of mechanical transportation into, what these sources refer to as a sentient cabin. And perhaps more concerningly, a checkpoint on wheels.
Yeah, and it is a profound engineering shift. And I think we need to approach this with a really grounded understanding of the underlying mechanics.
Definitely.
Because we are looking at a complete architectural redefinition of the relationship between humans and machines here. And it is important to clarify the nature of the sources we are looking at today.
Right, because these aren't cars you can just go buy today.
Exactly. These are patent filings and industry blueprints. A patent does not mean this exact iteration is rolling off the assembly line tomorrow morning.
Right.
However, a patent serves as a technical roadmap,
Yeah.
It shows us the specific hardware configurations and the algorithmic models that major automotive and technology firms believe are viable.
Where the money's going.
Exactly. It reveals where the billions of dollars in research and development are flowing. And the vision detailed in these documents is of a vehicle that operates as a continuous sensory environment.
Which sounds like sci-fi.
It does, but it's a machine that actively watches, analyzes, and calculates your internal state.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the sheer scale of the hardware they are proposing to embed inside the cabin is, it's massive.
It really is an extensive list.
We are talking about a complete redesign of the vehicle interior from just, passive upholstery into a highly monitored data collection node.
Right.
When you read the hardware inventory listed in these sources, it reads like the schematic for a high-security facility, not your family sedan.
Yeah, the hardware stack detailed in these in-cabin sensing patents goes far, far beyond the simple backup cameras or those little dashboard displays we are used to.
Right, it's not just a screen.
No, they detail arrays of multiple high-definition optical lenses capturing the cabin from different angles. So like the rear view mirror, the A-pillars, the steering column.
Just cameras everywhere.
Basically, yeah. But optical cameras require ambient light to function.
Right.
So if you are driving on a rural highway at midnight, a standard camera sees absolutely nothing.
Which makes sense. So how do they get around that?
Well, to solve this, the patents incorporate near-infrared imaging.
So, wait, we are talking about technology that bounces non-visible light spectrums off the occupants, like while you're driving.
Yes, exactly. Near-infrared light is invisible to the human eye, but it reflects off objects perfectly for these specialized sensors.
Oh, wow.
And this allows the system to pierce through total darkness. It can track the dilation of your pupils, the direction of your gaze, and the micro expressions on your face, even in a pitch black cabin.
Or like while you're driving through a tunnel or something.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop at visual data either. The documents detail the integration of high-fidelity directional microphone arrays.
For voice commands?
Well, yes, but these are specifically designed to isolate the driver's vocal frequencies from background road noise or the radio.
Okay, that's intense.
Yeah.
And then there are the physiological sensors, which is where I think this moves from just watching you to actually, feeling the driver.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Because the sources detail sensors embedded directly into the fabric of the car seats and the leather of the steering wheel. And I really want to understand the actual mechanics of that.
Sure.
Like, how does a steering wheel know what is happening inside my body?
Well, it really comes down to measuring minute biological signals. The steering wheel sensors often rely on something called galvanic skin response.
Okay.
Or electrodermal activity. When a human experiences a sympathetic nervous system reaction, whether that is stress, fear, or just sudden alertness, our sweat glands become slightly more active.
Even if we don't feel like we're sweating.
Right, exactly. Even a microscopic increase in moisture changes the electrical conductance of your skin.
Oh, I see.
So the capacitive sensors in the steering wheel run a tiny, completely imperceptible electrical current through your hands to measure that resistance in real time.
Okay, so if I grip the wheel tightly because someone, I don't know, cuts me off in traffic,
Yeah.
the wheel is measuring the microsweat on my palms to register a physiological spike.
Yes, that is the physical mechanism. And in the seats, they utilize a concept similar to ballistocardiography.
Which is what, exactly?
Well, instead of a cuff on your arm like at the doctor, highly sensitive piezoelectric sensors embedded under the cushion measure the microscopic mechanical movements your body makes every time your heart pumps blood.
Wait, really? The seat can feel my heartbeat.
Yes, it measures the physical recoil of your heartbeat, translating those tiny vibrations into a continuous heart rate and respiration metric.
That is just, I mean, the hardware is incredible. But the physical sensors are really just the collection phase, right?
Exactly, that's just gathering the raw material.
Because the sources make it clear that the real shift lies in the translation layer, which is the software.
Right.
The car's computer has to take all of this raw physical data like the pupil dilation from the infrared, the vocal tones from the mic, the skin conductance from the wheel, the heartbeat from the seat, and feed it somewhere.
Yeah, it feeds it all into advanced machine learning algorithms. And those machine learning models are tasked with an incredibly complex job. They have to take nuanced biological human behavior and compress it into measurable, calculable signals.
Like turning feelings into numbers.
Exactly. The algorithms perform feature extraction, looking for patterns in the raw data, and then they apply classification models to assign a specific label to your state of being.
And those labels are what the patents refer to as human perception metrics.
Right, that's the industry term.
This is where the translation happens.
Yes.
Because the patents explicitly state the system is designed to calculate your mood, your cognitive load, your distraction levels, your drowsiness, and impairment evaluation, and your physical involvement with objects.
Yeah, it's a very comprehensive list.
The cognitive load metric is particularly fascinating to me. Like, how does an algorithm actually calculate how hard my brain is working?
Well, cognitive load is generally calculated through an amalgamation of eye tracking and steering input.
Okay, so combining them.
Right, so the near-infrared cameras track what are called saccades. Those are the rapid, jerky movements of your eye as it scans an environment.
Okay.
It tracks those, as well as your blink rate. If your blink rate drops significantly and your eyes are locked in a fixed forward stare, while simultaneously the steering wheel sensors detect that you are making fewer but sharper micro corrections to stay in the lane.
The algorithm processes those combined data points together.
Exactly. The mathematical model interprets that specific pattern as a high cognitive load.
Because you're staring and not steering smoothly.
Right. It assumes your brain is processing so much external information that your peripheral awareness and smooth motor controls are degrading.
So it's assigning a mathematical score to my mental bandwidth. That is wild.
It really is.
Now, to ground this in reality, we have to look at why engineers are building this in the first place.
Right, because there's a reason for all this.
Exactly. There is a very strong, very legitimate safety argument driving this development. The primary use cases outlined in the early pages of these patents are heavily focused on preventing fatalities.
Absolutely, and the safety applications are undeniable and significant. We really have to acknowledge that.
For sure.
Consider the drowsiness detection models. If a driver is on a long, monotonous stretch of highway at 3 in the morning, their cognitive load drops, their blink duration increases, and the steering corrections become sluggish.
We've all kind of been there fighting sleep on a road trip.
Exactly. A system that can process those metrics in real time, recognize the onset of microsleep, and trigger a loud haptic and auditory warning could absolutely prevent a devastating collision.
It could save your life. Or, consider the tragic incidents of children accidentally left in the back seats of hot cars.
Right. Those are heartbreaking.
The near-infrared sensors and the piezoelectric seat sensors aren't just for the driver. They can detect the micro-breathing patterns or the thermal signature of an infant under a blanket.
Even if the car is turned completely off.
Right. And then the car can immediately roll down the windows, blast the AC, and trigger an emergency alert to the owner's phone. I mean, these are applications that save lives.
They are critical tools, but the technological architecture creates an unavoidable duality here.
Right, the double-edged sword.
Exactly, because the very same sensor stack, the exact same data pathways, and the same algorithmic processing required to detect an emergency can seamlessly operate as an ongoing, continuous profiling system.
And this is the pivot that the sources guide us through. It feels akin to driving inside an involuntary polygraph test.
That's a really good analogy.
Because the hardware doesn't just turn off when you're safe. It is one thing for the car's computer to recognize my eyes are closed to wake me up.
Right.
But it is an entirely different proposition for the machine to calculate my heart rate, my grip strength, and my vocal tone to determine if I'm angry, and then generate a continuous log of my emotional state.
And that's where we hit the core technical challenge here. And it's where the system runs into severe friction with reality.
Because emotions are messy.
Yes. It's the limitation of the algorithm itself. We are looking at a system attempting to apply rigid mathematical models to the absolute chaos of human emotion.
Right.
Think of it like trying to compress a massive, complex, high-resolution live symphony into a basic, flat MIDI file.
Oh, that makes sense.
The machine has to discard an enormous amount of nuance just to make the file fit into its system. It keeps the loudest notes, but it completely loses the soul, the acoustics, and the context of the performance.
That is a perfect way to visualize the data loss. The machine has to categorize you. It doesn't have a folder for, complex existential dread mixed with mild annoyance at the radio.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't.
It just has a folder for agitated. And the sources outline exactly how these algorithms fail when they try to force human behavior into those rigid folders.
They do. They give some great examples.
Let's trace the data path of a failure. So the seat measures an elevated heart rate, and the steering wheel measures increased electrodermal activity. The algorithm looks at those two spikes and applies the label impairment or regression.
But the biological signals for stress and the biological signals for danger are often totally identical.
Right.
The machine measures the spike in the sympathetic nervous system, but it lacks the contextual awareness to know why that spike occurred.
It just sees the numbers go up.
Exactly. You might have an elevated heart rate because you just drank a double espresso, or because you are rehearsing a difficult presentation for work in your head.
Or simply because you are listening to a highly suspenseful audio drama.
Right. The system registers the biological output but remains completely blind to the external catalyst.
And the visual tracking fails the exact same way. If the camera tracks my retinas looking away from the center of the windshield, the algorithm tallies a point toward the distraction metric.
Which seems logical to a machine.
Sure, but what if I am staring at my side mirror because I'm actively monitoring an erratic, dangerous driver swerving in the lane next to me?
Then you aren't distracted at all.
Right. My eyes are off the primary axis, but I am actually hyper-focused on safety. But the machine records the physical head movement, processes the geometry of the gaze, and wrongly categorizes it as inattentiveness.
And even the microphone arrays face this translation barrier. The system logs long periods of silence, right?
Okay.
While the algorithm might weight that silence as disengagement or a precursor to drowsiness.
Because you aren't making noise.
Exactly. Alternatively, the silence might be the byproduct of a driver intensely focusing on navigating a sudden patch of black ice.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The raw data 0.0 decibels of vocalization is the exact same, but the reality of the situation is completely inverted.
And the sources explicitly mention the difficulty algorithms have with complex states like grief, pain, anxiety, and even sarcasm.
Sarcasm is a huge hurdle for AI.
How does an algorithm process sarcasm? Like, if two friends are in the car having a loud, sarcastic, bantering conversation, the microphone picks up elevated volume, sharp vocal tones, and rapid exchanges.
Right.
The software parses those acoustic frequencies, runs them through its classification model, and outputs a flag for a heated argument or a risk factor. It completely misinterprets the social dynamic.
Because the engineering reality is that machines demand categorization. They require clean, actionable outputs.
They don't do nuance.
No, they don't. And while the sensor stack is presented in the patents as a passive intelligence system, its continuous categorization essentially turns the vehicle into a quiet judge.
A quiet judge, I like that.
It just sits behind the dashboard, constantly processing your biological data and rendering silent verdicts on your internal state.
And crucially, the patent documentation reveals that these verdicts, these human perception metrics, are not designed to stay isolated within the car's temporary memory buffer.
No, not at all.
They are designed to be exported. The technical phrasing in the sources states that these metrics are promoted to a using application.
Yes.
And this is where we have to look at the mechanics of control. If the algorithm processes my electrodermal activity and my vocal tone, cross-references it with its training data, and outputs a confidence interval of 85% that I am in an angry state,
Yeah.
what does the using application actually do with that payload?
Well, the patents explore a whole range of automated responses. The using application could interface directly with the vehicle's drive-by-wire
Well, it's
systems.
like the physical driving controls.
Yes. If the system classifies the driver as highly agitated or cognitively overloaded, the software could govern the engine, artificially capping the vehicle's top speed.
You're kidding.
No, or it could aggressively increase the sensitivity of the automatic emergency braking system. So it's actually altering the mechanical handling of the car based on a psychological assumption.
But the APIs, the application programming interfaces, they don't just connect to the brakes. They connect to the infotainment system, and by extension, the internet.
Right, the commercial side.
Yes, the sources explore these commercial data pathways. If the internal cameras and microphones determine that the passengers are exhibiting biological signs of positive engagement like smiling, relaxed posture, steady heart rates, while listening to a specific genre of audio, the system can package that emotional metric.
And then what does it do with it?
It transmits it via the car's cellular connection to an advertising network.
Wow, so the vehicle becomes a node in a broader data commodification network.
Exactly.
It creates a continuous feedback loop where your biological reactions are used to curate and target the media and advertising you receive inside the cabin.
Which is wild. But consider the implications when those APIs connect to risk assessment institutions.
Like insurers.
Right. If the algorithm routinely logs high cognitive load and elevated stress metrics during your daily commute, does that data payload get transmitted to the telemetry systems managed by your auto insurance provider?
That shifts the entire paradigm of automotive insurance.
It really does. They aren't just tracking if you slam on the brakes anymore. They're tracking your emotional baseline.
Yeah.
Your premium could fluctuate because the algorithm decided you were an agitated driver. Or think about civil litigation.
Oh, that's a whole other layer.
If you are involved in a collision, the opposing counsel could subpoena the vehicle's data logs, not just to see how fast you were going, but to extract the algorithmic verdict that you were in an angry state of mind 3 minutes prior to the impact.
That's terrifying.
The machine's flawed categorization of your stress suddenly becomes admissible data.
It fundamentally changes the environment of the vehicle. The car is no longer a passive machine responding only to the physical inputs of the steering wheel and pedals. It is reacting to and reporting on its interpretation of your biology.
It's reporting on you.
Yes. But this internal data economy, whether it is adjusting the engine or adjusting your insurance rates, is still largely operating within the commercial sector.
Right.
The sources we are examining highlight a much more profound architectural shift when the vehicle's APIs are directed toward government infrastructure.
Yes, this is the transition from the sentient cabin assessing your mood to the biometric checkpoint actively verifying your identity
Right.
and preloading your profile before a human interaction even begins.
To fully grasp the magnitude of this engineering proposal, we really must look at the mechanics of a traditional roadside law enforcement encounter.
Okay, let's set the stage.
Historically, the interaction begins with a physical approach. The officer pulls the vehicle over, walks up to the driver's side window, and requests a physical license and registration.
Right, the classic traffic stop.
Exactly. That localized physical exchange of documentation is the precise moment identity is introduced into the scenario.
The interaction starts neutral, or at least the identity is a blank slate until the card actually changes hands. But the newer biometric patent concepts, detailed in the sources, completely rewrite that operational sequence.
They do. They propose a system where the vehicle's onboard sensor stack operates proactively.
Meaning it doesn't wait for the window to roll down.
Right. The external sensors detect the specific light frequencies or acoustic sirens of a police cruiser. This triggers a localized software protocol within the civilian vehicle. Automatically. The in-cabin optical cameras and the capacitive steering wheel sensors capture the driver's facial geometry and potential fingerprint data.
Just grab it right then and there.
Yes. And then the vehicle's computer hashes that raw biometric data into a mathematical vector.
And then it transmits that vector.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It uses the vehicle's high-speed cellular connection to ping an external API gateway, sending that encrypted biometric vector to external law enforcement databases for rapid cross-referencing cross-referencing.
So the car is acting as its own digital emissary.
It is.
It isn't just a machine sitting on the shoulder of the road. It is actively scanning the person in the driver's seat, packaging their biological signature, and querying a police database.
And we have to look at the motivation here. The explicit engineering goal, as outlined in the patent literature, is officer safety.
Which makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
The system is designed to return a data payload to the officer's cruiser terminal, providing them with the verified identity and the historical profile of the vehicle's occupants before they ever open their own car door.
So they know who they're walking up to.
Exactly. And we must acknowledge the very real-world hazards this is attempting to solve. Law enforcement officers face immense, unpredictable risks when walking up to an unknown vehicle.
It's one of the most dangerous things they do.
Yes. So a system capable of accurately flagging a verified active threat or a known dangerous individual prior to the physical approach is a powerful, legitimate safety mechanism.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Oh.
While the safety utility is totally clear, the mechanical reality of how this system operates creates a massive alteration in the power dynamic.
How so?
Because the car is functioning as a scanner, a collector, and a broadcaster. It isn't merely sending a signal that says a human is present in the driver's seat.
Right, it's much more detailed.
It is transmitting a highly specific message. It's saying, here's the mathematical vector of the face currently in the cabin, here's the resulting database match, and here is their historical profile.
It is completely preloading the encounter. The digital handshake, the identity verification, and the subsequent retrieval of the driver's background all occur in the cloud, silently, before any human-to-human communication takes place.
But what happens when the underlying technology simply fails?
Well, that's the big question.
Let's walk through the mechanics of a false positive, because it's not a perfect system. Suppose I am borrowing my brother's car. The car's internal camera attempts to map my facial landmarks. But it is late afternoon, the sun is causing a harsh glare across the lens, and I am wearing a thick pair of sunglasses and hat.
So the camera can't get a good look.
Exactly. The camera captures an occluded, poorly lit image. It compresses that flawed image into a mathematical vector and sends it to the database. The database algorithms struggle to align the points and return a false match, misidentifying me as someone with an active felony warrant.
And then the failure cascades instantly.
Yes.
The API returns the false match to the officer's terminal. The officer, relying on the algorithmic output, now approaches the vehicle under the assumption that they are walking into a highly dangerous, potentially violent confrontation.
Which is terrifying.
It is. The technology, which was explicitly designed to reduce risk, has artificially escalated the tension of the encounter based on a calculation error caused by bad lighting.
And the sources document exactly why these algorithmic failures are not just hypothetical edge cases.
Right, there are systemic issues.
Facial recognition models are heavily dependent on the training data used to build them. If the original databases used to train the machine learning models lacked sufficient demographic diversity, the resulting algorithm will statistically struggle to accurately map and match the facial geometry of specific populations.
This is a known issue in the industry.
Yes, particularly people with darker skin tones or varying facial structures. The hardware might capture the image perfectly, but the mathematical model fails the comparison test.
And beyond the limitations of the optical mapping, there are severe vulnerabilities in the databases themselves.
What kind of vulnerabilities?
Well, law enforcement databases are massive, fragmented, and notoriously prone to clerical errors.
Oh, right. Human error.
Exactly. An API might successfully match your face, but pull a profile attached to an expunged record, a clerical misentry, or a decades-old infraction that was legally sealed.
So it's right about who you are, but wrong about your history.
Yes. The system delivers a perfectly accurate face match attached to completely inaccurate context.
And even if the hardware works flawlessly, the algorithm matches perfectly, and the database is completely up to date, the entire automated process fundamentally strips away human context.
That's true.
Let's look at the emotional categorization we discussed earlier. Getting pulled over is an inherently stressful event. A driver's heart rate will spike, their electrodermal activity will increase, and they might exhibit anxious microexpressions.
Which is a totally normal physiological response to seeing flashing lights in your rearview mirror.
Right. But if the vehicle's internal sensors are actively monitoring those physiological responses and transmitting them alongside the biometric identity payload, the officer's terminal might flash a warning that the driver is highly agitated or exhibiting aggressive biomarkers.
Wow.
The driver's perfectly normal human anxiety is instantly weaponized into a metric of suspicion. The invisible label is applied before the window even rolls down.
And they have no idea.
None. The driver is sitting there, completely oblivious to the digital telemetry that has just been exchanged, and they spend the entire physical interaction trying to overcompensate for a machine-generated profile they don't even know exists.
They are essentially arguing with a ghost in the machine's architecture.
Exactly.
It dismantles the neutral starting point of the interaction. The technological mediation replaces the initial human assessment with an algorithmic conclusion.
Right.
But the existence of this API handoff relies on a foundational infrastructural requirement that the sources identify as the most critical concern.
And what is that?
If your vehicle can capture your face and instantly query it against a cloud database to retrieve your profile, it means your biological identity is permanently stored in a networked architecture.
Which brings us to the permanence problem.
Yeah.
This section of the analysis looks at the long-term reality of utilizing physical biology as a digital credential.
It's a huge paradigm shift in security.
We have to examine the mechanical difference between a traditional cryptographic password and a biometric marker.
Right, because they behave very differently in a system. The architecture of digital security has historically relied on revocable credentials.
Meaning you can change them.
Yes. If a centralized database is breached and your alphanumeric password is stolen, the mitigation process is stressful, sure, but it's straightforward.
You just change your password.
Exactly. The system administrator invalidates the compromised string of characters. You generate a new cryptographic key, update your two-factor authentication protocols, and secure the account. The old credential becomes mathematically useless.
It is like burning a compromised credit card.
Right.
The bank issues a new classic card with a new 16-digit number, and the old one is just dead plastic. But the sources highlight that biometric data breaks this foundational rule of security.
Completely breaks it.
Your face, the geometric spacing of your eyes, the unique ridges of your fingerprints, the specific acoustic resonance of your vocal cords, these are immutable physical traits.
They cannot be revoked. Once the vehicle's sensor stack maps your biological features and converts them into data, that data becomes a permanent risk. You cannot generate a new facial structure if a manufacturer's cloud server is compromised by a malicious actor.
You can't just grow a new face.
No, you can't.
Now, the industry defense for this, and the sources outline this counter-argument fairly, is that they do not actually store a high-resolution JPEG of your face or a WebAV file of your voice.
Right, that's what the engineers argue.
They use a hashing process. The car's computer analyzes the image, extracts the key geometric data points, and runs it through a cryptographic algorithm to create a biometric template.
Which is just a long string of numbers and letters.
Exactly. It represents the mathematical relationship between your features.
That is the standard engineering practice, yes, and it is theoretically designed to protect privacy.
Because you can't reverse engineer it.
That's the theory. The idea is that a hacker who steals the mathematical template cannot reverse engineer it to generate a photograph of your face.
Okay, but
However, the sources emphasize that a biometric template is still an immutable key tied directly to your physical body.
right, because it's still you.
Exactly. If that specific template is stolen and other systems use a similar hashing algorithm to verify identity, the stolen template can be deployed to impersonate you across different networks.
Oh, wow.
The permanence problem remains intact because the underlying biological source material cannot be reset.
So how is this biometric integration in a car mechanically different from the biometric security we already use every day?
Like on a phone.
Yeah. My smartphone uses near-infrared projectors to map my face and unlock the screen. I do it 50 times a day. Why is the car's sensor stack considered vastly more problematic by these technical analysts?
The distinction lies in the network architecture and the environment itself.
Okay, break that down for us.
A modern smartphone utilizes what is known as a secure enclave. It's a dedicated, isolated microprocessor built directly into the device's hardware.
So it's walled off from the rest of the phone.
Yes. When your phone maps your face, the mathematical template never leaves that isolated chip. It never travels over the cellular network. It is not backed up to a cloud server. It is a localized, closed-loop verification process.
It verifies locally and just sends a simple yes or no to the operating system.
Correct. But a vehicle operates as a multi-node, public-private network.
It's not just a closed loop.
No, it is not a closed ecosystem sitting in your pocket. A modern connected car is constantly exchanging massive data payloads with external infrastructure.
Like who?
It communicates via APIs with dealership diagnostic networks, manufacturer cloud servers for over-the-air updates, third-party infotainment applications, toll booth transponders, and cellular networks.
It is literally a 2-ton data router rolling through public space.
And because of this constant connectivity, the biometric data does not just trigger a single momentary unlock sequence like your phone does.
It's continuous.
Yes. The sources describe the accumulation problem. The in-cabin sensor stack is continually operating. It isn't just scanning you once, it is compiling a longitudinal, multi-year behavioral database.
It leverages all those internal sensors we discussed in the sentient cabin segment. Over the span of 5 years, the vehicle's memory banks have logged the exact biometric signature of everyone who has ever driven the car, right?
Yes, and everyone who has ever sat in the passenger seat.
It has mapped your daily routines. It has correlated your cognitive load and electrodermal stress metrics against specific geographic locations and traffic patterns.
It knows exactly where you get stressed out.
Right. It has built an incredibly dense, permanent psychological and biological profile.
The sheer volume of this accumulated data raises severe questions regarding data flow and consumer control.
Questions that we don't really have answers to yet.
Exactly. The analytical frameworks presented in these sources pose a series of highly specific technical questions that the industry has yet to fully resolve. Well, when the optical sensors map the face of a passenger who just entered the vehicle, where is that specific processing taking place? Is the feature extraction happening locally on the vehicle's CPU? Or is the raw image being transmitted over a 5G connection to a centralized server farm to be processed?
And if it is sent to the cloud,
who's buying that data?
are the biometric templates and the correlated emotional metrics being pooled into massive data lakes to train future iterations of machine learning algorithms?
That's a huge concern for privacy advocates.
And how does the system handle the concept of deletion? If an owner goes into the dashboard settings and presses delete user data, does that command trigger a localized wipe of the hard drive? Or does it execute a synchronized purge across every distributed cloud server and backup node where that template might be stored?
That's practically impossible to verify as a consumer. And the mechanism of consent is entirely unresolved for non-owners, too.
Oh, like passengers.
Yes. The driver may have signed a digital terms of service agreement when purchasing the vehicle, authorizing the data collection. But how does the system manage the legal and technical requirements of passenger consent?
If my friend gets in my car, they didn't sign a contract with the manufacturer.
Exactly. But if the system is passively scanning everyone in the cabin, it is capturing the biometric vectors of individuals who never interacted with the manufacturer's legal agreements.
These are not abstract philosophical musings. These are immediate hard engineering and policy questions.
Yes, they need answers now.
The sources demand that the architecture of these systems be interrogated now before the hardware becomes completely standardized.
Right, because once it's in every car, it's too late.
Can a consumer physically opt out? Can they purchase a base model that does not contain the near-infrared cameras and the capacitive steering wheel sensors, or will the hardware be intrinsically baked into the structural safety ratings of the vehicle?
Making it essentially impossible to buy a car without it.
Right.
We also have to look at the legal access protocols, like warrants.
Yes. If the biometric and behavioral logs are stored on the manufacturer's cloud servers rather than locally on the vehicle, it alters the legal threshold for law enforcement access.
Because it's not physically in your driveway anymore.
Exactly. Rather than requiring a localized physical warrant to extract the hard drive from the dashboard, agencies could potentially utilize broader subpoenas directed at the manufacturer's data centers to acquire the longitudinal profile of the driver.
That bypasses so many local protections. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We have analyzed a massive amount of technical architecture today.
We covered a lot of ground.
Let's trace the full operational path that these sources have laid out. We began with the engineering blueprint of the sentient cabin, exploring how near-infrared cameras, piezoelectric seat sensors, and capacitive steering wheels collect raw biological data to feed machine learning algorithms.
Algorithms that attempt to compress human complexity into rigid human perception metrics, like cognitive load and emotional state. We then followed the data pathways outward, examining how the vehicle transitions into a networked biometric checkpoint.
Right, the API handshakes.
We looked at those APIs that allow the car to automatically map your facial geometry, hash it into a template, query law enforcement databases, and transmit a preloaded, potentially flawed algorithmic profile to an officer's terminal before physical interaction even begins.
It's a fundamental change to public space.
And finally, we explore the mechanical realities of the permanence problem, the critical difference between a revocable cryptographic password and an immutable physical trait.
Passwords change, faces don't.
We discussed how the vehicle, unlike a closed-loop smartphone, operates as a continuously connected node, accumulating a permanent, unchangeable database of your physical and psychological existence that you cannot easily control or erase.
The foundational takeaway from this technical analysis is really a shift in the operational definition of ownership.
Ownership of the car or of the data?
Both, honestly. Consider the traditional mechanical interaction with an automobile. The machine required a physical key. Right.
If you possessed the cut metal or the programmed fob, the machine acknowledged your authorization and engaged the engine.
It didn't care who held the key.
Exactly. But the biometric architecture described in these patents alters the primary query. The machine no longer asks for an external token of authorization. It queries your physical biology.
It maps your geometry.
Yes. It asks, are you the specific biological entity I am programmed to recognize?
It fundamentally tethers the machine to your physical body.
It does.
The vehicle ceases to be a passive, isolated tool. It becomes a continuously reporting node within a much larger commercial and governmental data ecosystem.
An ecosystem that actively monitors, categorizes, and logs your state of being.
Regardless of whether you fully comprehended the technical specifications buried in the software agreement when you bought the car.
The autonomy of the vehicle, in the traditional sense of a private, disconnected space, is structurally dismantled by this integration.
It completely shatters that opening illusion of the car as a rolling sanctuary.
It really does. And before we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, deeply complex technical scenario to consider.
Okay.
It wasn't explicitly outlined in the patents we reviewed, but it is the inevitable consequence of the data accumulation architectures we just analyzed. Think about the mechanical life cycle of a vehicle and the future of the used car market.
Oh, the transfer of the hardware.
Yes. 10 years from now, when you go to purchase a secondhand vehicle, you are buying a machine with a massive, localized hard drive that has been continuously logging biometric and behavioral data for a decade.
It's full of history.
Exactly. How can a consumer ever technically verify that the biometric templates of the previous owners have been fully cryptographically wiped from the system?
They probably can't.
Are the machine learning weights, the subtle algorithmic adjustments the car made to accommodate the stress levels and driving habits of the previous owner, are they still buried deep within the software's neural network?
That's a fascinating question.
Are the localized law enforcement flags or the commercial insurance APIs still holding on to the data structures of the people who drove it before you? Will you be stepping into a fresh, clean machine? Or will you be inheriting a networked computer that is permanently algorithmically prejudiced by the ghosts of its previous occupants?
It is a staggering engineering reality to consider.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Next time you're looking at the technical specifications of a new vehicle, look past the horsepower and the battery range and take a very hard look at the sensor stack and the data pathways.